Welcome. Namaste. Thank you all so much for being here. My heart feels full and I feel tears coming to my eyes of gratitude for each one of you, for your interest in what I will be sharing today. But we will start first with a moment of presence so you can find a comfortable seat. Lengthen your spine. Relax your body. Relax your face. And allow your breath to slow down. Not trying to change anything. Simply being. As you are in this moment. Bring your awareness to your heart. And feel your own aliveness. The aliveness of your soul. And together we'll take a slow inhale through the nose. And a gentle exhale through the mouth. And when you feel ready, you can begin to move your body in any way that feels good. And blink your eyes open, coming back to the screen. So welcome again, and thank you for taking the time to join me for this session in which I don't know yet exactly what will be said because I decided just as last year not to plan, just to allow what wants to come through to be said. But I do want to share that my intention is to share authentically, to uplift, to inspire through my own experience, because ultimately we share so much more than we think sometimes. We think that we are alone in our struggles and in the challenges that we face. And while the challenges might be different, the human condition is the same. So we all experience challenges in life, whether it's facing fear or anxiety or sadness or any of these more difficult emotions, just as the same as we all can experience joy and expansion and gratitude and love. And in my experience, time in silence and time in solitude even more sort of distills the teachings experientially. So I feel like I've been learning about, the Buddhist teachings and yogic teachings for over a decade now. And it's sometimes in solitude that, being alone and in the depth of it, that I'm like, everything comes and everything goes. And many of you have heard me say this, I'm like, everything comes and everything goes. And it's like, one of Ramana's most famous sayings, let what comes come, let what goes go, see what remains. And I've said it so many times. And then the lived experience of really witnessing how everything, the most beautiful memories, felt experiences, and so on, and the most challenging ones come and go. And what is left, of course, is who we really are. Not our mind, not even the body, not even our memories, who we think we are, but our true essence. And so I had a moment of thinking, oh, should I share? What could I share? How do you speak about silence? I've done this multiple times now, but there's this calling, this feeling of it is important to share, because not many lay people, that's us, get to experience such a long time in silence. Monks, of course, people who renounce their normal life, we could say they experience, a month is nothing for some people. Ramana was in silence for 16 years. So 31 days sounds like, oh, it's just a month. But not many lay people get to experience this. So as a very normal person that I am, I feel very blessed for the opportunity to have these experiences. And with it comes a sense of responsibility to share, to make it accessible to anyone who is interested. So I'll start before the retreat, because it feels important to rewind a little bit to prior to the retreat. So I think most of you know that last year I did a 59-day silent retreat. It was originally 49 days, and on day 50, they asked us if we wanted to extend 10 days. And I was amazed to see my hand raise. I was like, oh, well, I guess I will do the 59 days. But during the solitude, which was 39 days last year, I had some very difficult moments, the hardest of my life. And I wrote in my journal, I don't think I'll ever do this again. And you know how it is. Like there's this divide sometimes. Ramana said the self is only one. When limited, it is the ego. When unlimited, it is the true self. So this idea that we're split in two is more of a mental experience. The ego is simply the shadow of the soul, we could say. But still, I felt this divide. Like my mind is like, yeah, but you'll be away from your partner, and you won't be with the kids that I volunteer with in my community. And, you won't be generating income, and it costs money, and this list of reasons. And the biggest one being that it was difficult last year. And still, I've learned more and more over the years to listen to my heart. And my heart was like, it's a non-negotiable, like, yes, this is something that needs to be done again. Because while last year was challenging, there were also some of the most precious moments that I can remember in this lifetime of feeling so connected to the divine and recognizing that essence, that divine essence in everything, from the way the sun glimmers on water, and recognizing that, like, yes, the divine is always here. And in daily life, in my experience, it's easy to miss that. When we're checking our emails or we're rushing to do something, it's like, yeah, the divine is there, but I'm also not really looking for the divine. I'm just rushing to get through what needs doing. And so there was that strong calling to go again. But I couldn't do the 49 days again because Rachel and I planned this 300-hour that starts just next week that some of you know about. And so I asked my teacher, I said, I can't go to the 49 days. Do you think I could do my own retreat? And he said that he approved, that he thought I could, because solitude is that we want to prepare for, because it requires certain mental stability. So it's not something that you just throw yourself into. To do the 49 days, you send an application letter expressing your intentions, your aspirations. So he gave me his approval, and I decided I would do 20 days of solitude, 1 day of travel, and 10 days with my teacher. And when I booked it and organized it, I felt so clear that it was right and perfect, and I was so happy. And a month before the retreat, more or less, I started having a bit of like, wow, a month is really long. Although 59 days is longer, 31 days is really long. And I started feeling a bit anxious about it when I would think about it. And then it would come in waves. Then I would be like, oh, I'm so grateful I can go. And then it would come again. The fear would come again. And so there was this kind of dance between gratitude and excitement and fear and anxiety. But in daily life, in my experience, it's quite easy to push down the more challenging emotions because I can just grab my guitar and sing a mantra that will uplift me, or eat some chocolate, or call my mom, or message Rachel, or do something that is uplifting. And so I aspire to feel all my emotions fully, but I am aware that I don't always. And so anyway, I started having like a mental negotiation where I was like, well, I could just go for 21 days instead of 31 days. That would be a lot less and a lot easier. And I really feel like my heart put her foot down and was just like, no, it's 31 days. It's non-negotiable. We're doing it. And so I set out on my journey. I said goodbye to my boyfriend. I cried as I left him and left our cat. And once I was set, with my backpack on the journey, it felt like a pilgrimage. And I was like, no, this is right. I know it's right. The journey was quite long. I have to take a 12-hour transport from a town across the lake to another town, and then an overnight 12-hour overnight bus to the coast, which is where the meditation center is. And then to be in solitude, I have to go in the mountains, so another 4 hours, which is helpful to have a long journey to prepare mentally. And the night before I was set to start my journey in solitude, I saw a whale. I had never seen a whale in my life. And it felt like a blessing, like a message of a blessing saying, okay, yes, you're ready. I looked up on Google what it meant, and it said something about spiritual maturity. And I was like, yes, okay, here we go. Thank you, whale. But the night before was really difficult. And I share this because, I think there's so much value in authenticity. It would be nice to say like, oh, I went so confident and it was easy. But it wasn't. The night before, I actually had diarrhea, and I think it's because I was anxious. I had weird nightmares that I didn't understand, but I was going. And in the morning, when saying goodbye to my boyfriend on the phone, I said to myself, I'm not going to cry because it feels unfair to have him feel he has to console me for something that I've chosen to do. So I said, I'm not going to cry. And when we were saying goodbye, I just started crying like quite intensely. And he said to me, you chose to do this. And part of me wanted to say, and I don't want to do it anymore. But I knew that it was really important not to say it. So I was just like, I know. And so we said goodbye, and I set out on our journey with my backpack into the mountains, really windy road. And once arrived at San Jose del Pacifico, which is the town in the mountains where this retreat center is, which is called Refugio Terraza de la Tierra, which is magnificent, like off the grid in the mountains. They grow their own food. They take the water from the land and bless it twice a week, do a prayer and have crystals in the water. And all the people who work there are obviously working with so much love. And so once I got to San Jose del Pacifico, it was like the weight was lifted and I was like, oh, of course, yes, this is, and I see it a little bit like it was like my soul was leading the way and my ego was like kicking and screaming like a kid going to school, you know, being like, no, I don't want to go. And my soul was just like, come on, like he'll be okay. And so I messaged Rachel. I called my boyfriend one last time since there was Wi-Fi, and I felt and messaged my parents and closed my devices. Got a tuk-tuk to this place. I was so happy when I arrived. I just giggled seeing the gates there. I was like, yes, I'm back, seeing the mountains. There was an unfortunate incident is that I hadn't turned off my Wi-Fi on my phone, and I assumed the place didn't have Wi-Fi because they only run on solar power. And I received a message when I arrived there, and my phone had never been there because last year they took our phone since it was organized by the school. And so I realized there was internet and it was an open web. So the whole retreat, whenever I had a hard moment, I just had to be like, no, I'm not touching my phone. So it required so much willpower, just knowing that I could just go up to the reception and connect to the Wi-Fi, which I didn't do. But it just added a layer of difficulty knowing that I could in those more challenging moments. And so the arrival, I booked the same cabin, which is so simple. It's a compost toilet. It's a tiny little room, just enough to place a mat, and a bed made of bricks and clay, like a tiny little mattress. So very rustic, very basic. For the shower, you need to make a fire to heat the water. And in the evening, it gets chilly, so you can also make a fire. And I was so happy to be back. And the first few days were very easeful. My meditations, it felt like I had just left the previous year, because the previous year, part of the challenge was realizing how restless I was. I thought that I was quite calm, but not having anything to do. And also the length of the retreat was quite overwhelming last year. So, you know, imagine on day 13, or on day 3 of solitude, which was day 13 of silence, there were 37 days of solitude. So yes, so last year it felt very overwhelming. But as time passed, I felt like my meditations really, I was able to drop in deeper beyond the mental chatter. And so it felt like this year, like I almost like skipped the challenges of last year, and I went straight back to the depth that I had found the previous year, which I had hoped for, but was still a nice surprise. Like I was like, oh yes, that place, this place of stillness, of profound peace. That is not a personal thing, right? I don't think that's like Melissa has that and everyone, you know, no one else does. This is our true essence that is revealed when we're able to calm the mind, when the body comes to a deeper state of relaxation. So it was a real blessing to discover that I could return to what I had experienced. But then within a few days, some worries started to arise. These past few months, my boyfriend had a motorbike accident, and he'd never had one before. And so while I was in solitude, the thought would arise, like, what if he gets into an accident? But it felt like last year when a thought like this would arise, like I would be overwhelmed with anxiety. And at times I just didn't know what to do. And this year, it felt like there was a lot more spaciousness, like the difficult thoughts that would arise would come. We all know those thoughts, whatever your difficult thoughts are, some come. And so it felt like, okay, that's a thought. And it's not one that I like, but I can see that it's not something that is happening right now, which, you know, all the authentic mystical teachers tell us. Patanjali's first line in the Yoga Sutras is yoga now. The union with the divine is only possible in the present. And thoughts about something happening, something that didn't happen or we wish hadn't happened, are related to past and future. And so this lesson that presence is where we need to be for that to happen, for that spiritual connection, was very helpful in grounding myself in the present, observing the thoughts. And when difficult emotions came, I remember reading in a book that a challenge or an emotion, the peak of the emotion only lasts 90 seconds. And so I reminded myself of that, and I could see the rise. First, I tried pushing away, although I know that it doesn't work, and I've preached it to many, feel your feelings. And so I was like, oh no, that doesn't work. So feel it, allow yourself to feel. And indeed, I felt the peak of the emotion. And it really is 90 seconds tops, intense, this like discomfort, fear maybe, or sadness, maybe a tear. And then it would go away. And, you know, a few minutes later, I'd hear a bird singing or a ray of sun come through the window, and again, joy would come back. So this was something I feel I have been learning for years. I think we all are, but something that felt even more crystal clear during this retreat, that there is a part of us, the witness, the Atman, that is always there. It's like the center of the cyclone, of the hurricane. And waves come, waves go, and there can be chaos. But there is this part of us that is deep inside, that is always still, that's always peaceful. And we often ignore it. We're often more caught up in the winds and the turbulences. But the more we focus on that part of ourselves, the more we can be in the world without getting so pulled by everything. We hear of world affairs and we can be lost in worry for what is happening everywhere in the world, and therefore unable to serve those who are around us. Or we can be anchored in the heart and in this deep sense of peace, and still be aware of what is happening in the world and pray for peace. But we cannot, or we can pray for peace without embodying peace, but it doesn't make much sense, because the only real way we pray for peace is by embodying peace. So even now, as you listen, you can notice if you've drifted away from your heart space, and bring your awareness back into your heart space. And this doesn't need any, special practice. It's simply awareness in the heart. You can write, you can listen, you can move with awareness in your heart. And there's a different quality to our experience of life. We're experiencing the same things, but with this feeling of anchoring, of groundedness within. And on this theme, on praying for peace, one of the days I was walking in the forest, and they have little signs, and one of them said padam padam, which means step by step. And as I was walking, I was like, oh, padam padam, and I had the thought, like, I felt like I'm making slow progress, like this is my 6th meditation retreat, my 2nd long one, and I still have many thoughts. My teacher speaks of the state no mind, which I have experienced, and this retreat was the longest time I had without thoughts, but still, it feels like slow progress. But I was thinking, actually, this is not measurable. This is the mind wanting to measure, saying, okay, how do you say, you know, how much did I progress? I discovered that I can meditate 4 hours, which felt like new. I didn't even know that was possible last year, to come into such a deep state of tranquility that there's no rush to stop the meditation. Last year, 2 hours was still challenging. Last year I experienced, I think, maybe 1 3-hour meditation, and that was it. Whereas this time around, I had a few 3-hour meditations, a couple of 4-hour meditations. I discovered I could stay in the same posture for 2.5 hours. And all these things, of course, are signs of some sort of progress, but still, they feel like, in a way, I was just like, oh, you know, that's great, but it's not it. But the real progress was, one afternoon, I was having one of these difficult moments. I missed my boyfriend, and sometimes I would walk in the forest and I would remember my teacher's words. He says, solitude is not lonely. And I would look at the trees and I was like, solitude is not lonely. I'm so happy to be here walking in the forest. And other times I'd be like, I feel so lonely. So, you know, so it was one of these moments where I was feeling lonely, and I just wanted to message my boyfriend and just check that he was okay. And often my suffering was very personal. And while, yes, at the beginning of the retreat, I do a consecration and I pray for all my efforts to be for the highest benefit of all sentient beings, the truth is that a lot of my experienced suffering is about me, my limited self, my regrets, my hopes, my fears. And so this moment felt very special because I was in one of these moments of, I would say, some suffering. And I mentally said, God, please relieve. And what would have followed would have been, please relieve me of my suffering. But what came to my heart, that what came through was, please relieve those who suffer me more than me of their suffering. And that felt like, this is it. This is what this path is about. This is the entire purpose. And so while a part of me wanted to experience samadhi, my only experience was in my first 10-day silent retreat, which was very brief and, you know, was like a little window opening and closing quite fast again. And that's been my only experience in my first 10-day silent retreat. And I wanted to experience samadhi again. And I was secretly hoping I might have an apparition of the goddess of compassion, Tara, as my teacher says that can happen. And I've been repeating the Tara mantra for a couple of years almost now. And so there's always that, like, those little hopes. I'm like, oh, maybe something really cool will happen. Like maybe I'll enter Shambhala, this realm of compassion. So many expectations, if I'm totally transparent, you know, going in there like, oh, maybe something cool will happen. But upon reflection, this moment where I was suffering, praying to God to relieve others of their suffering, others who suffer more than me, looking back now, and in that moment, I was like, wow, this feels so profound, because when we're not suffering, it can feel quite easy to pray for other people's suffering, to say, you know, of course, I don't want anyone to suffer. But when we are suffering, often we are not really able to see, to think of others. Often we're caught in our own little suffering. And in that moment, I felt such a spaciousness and freedom from my own little story, which is so minute compared to what other souls go through at this time on earth. And so it felt like that was the progress. That was the proof of all this effort, because it feels quite effortsome. You know, the recommendation is 6 to 8 hours of meditation in solitude. And this time, over the 20 days, 2 days, I reached 8 hours. And, you know, maybe hearing 31 days or 8 hours, it just sounds a little bit like, but if you meditate 1 hour and you imagine times that by 8, you'll probably get a sense of just how long it is when you're finding it difficult. So there were many thoughts, some very difficult meditations where there was resistance, where there was worry, but there were also some really beautiful meditations where it felt like the spaces between the thoughts were long, like they were even long moments of no mind. And in that, of course, such a profound rest. Like, oh, no desires, no needs, no wanting, no regretting, just being, pure being. And that pure being is bliss. And you know, this is what the mystics tell us of all traditions. It's not like, you know, one lineage says, yes, bliss is our nature, and then another lineage says, no, actually suffering is our true nature. The Buddha said the nature of the human experience is suffering indeed, but this is until self-realization. And so this definition of our true essence, Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, is not just a concept. It's not just an idea that some mystic came up with, like, oh, that sounds nice. This is the same message that is reiterated in different words by all the great mystics who have walked this earth. So we're very blessed to have access to different teachings that are like this finger that points to the moon. Of course, the finger is not the moon, but if we are interested in this path of compassion and realization of our true nature, we have all the guidance we need. You know, Patanjali and Buddha and others tell us when you run after your desires and you run away from fear, you continue suffering. Very clear. And yet many of us run after our desires and try to repress suffering. And so having the lived experience of sitting with the discomfort and then finding peace again, like sometimes in a 2-hour meditation, it felt like 1 hour and 45 minutes was just like thought, 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 thought. And I'd be like, oh yeah, who am I? Breath. Pause between the breath, thinking, 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 who am I? Oh yes, pause, thinking, 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 and maybe just out of 2 hours, the last 15 minutes, feeling like, okay, here we are in this place where there is no more resistance and fighting. And so I share as well in the hope that if meditation still feels difficult for you, you know, I share authentically, meditation is sometimes still very difficult for me. And I've been practicing for over a decade, and I did 59 days last year, and I did another 31 days this year. And I can still say sometimes meditation feels very challenging. And also, when I'm able to sit with all of that, when I can see, yeah, worry, restlessness, things coming up, and just let them pass, then again, that radiance of the soul comes through. The peace, the joy that is always in us, not somewhere we have to go to. I used to dream of going to Tibet and India, and I still do. I would love to, but now I understand that peace is not more there than it is here. And I hope that, yeah, you can know this in your heart, that peace is in you by nature. So I wanted to read a brief passage from my journal. I wrote every day. My teacher recommends that we write after every meditation, just to keep a journal that gives us a sense of how our practice is evolving. This was on day 14, and this meditation was 3.5 hours. And I wrote, everything comes and everything goes. this basic truth is so clear in longer practices. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, pleasant and unpleasant. Truly nothing stays. Everything is always changing. And with this awareness comes a calm acceptance that is both peaceful and joyful. The sensation of the first rays of sun coming through the door, a cool breeze, and for some moments, nothing but the depth, the stillness of the heart that is always there. And so these are the insights after a long meditation where many things came and many things went. At the end, this feeling of, yes, what is left is that depth, that stillness, and then how that echoes into the rest of the day. Sometimes a meditation practice can be very difficult, but then you finish and you look at the sky and it just looks a little bit bluer than it might have if you hadn't. And you smell your tea and it's like the fragrance of whatever you're steaming is just a little bit sweeter. And you hear the birds sing and it's like you hear it just a little bit better. So even if the practice is challenging, no effort is wasted. This is also something my teacher says, which is very comforting. At one point I wrote in my journal, thank God no effort is wasted, because I put in a lot of effort. And at times, it's like 3 hours of thinking. It's hard to sit with that, to be like, wow, I've been teaching meditation now for years. And I sat for 3 hours and it feels like I've been thinking for 3 hours. Like, I'm tired, of this thinking, like, where's the off button? Can someone just switch that off? But then finishing the practice and sitting and opening my eyes and hearing the birds and hearing the song of the rustling of the leaves, which without meditation practice, we can easily miss. The sacredness of everything is always there. But our practice can really support us in that inward motion, that introspection, when we look within, beyond, of course, the emotions we're not denying or repressing. We embrace everything and also aspire to go beyond. So not excluding, including, accepting all of it and going beyond. And in that process, it's like life just continues to blossom in a way that maybe before, as children, we experience this. If I asked all of you, I would love for us to have a full-on conversation, by the way, but since I committed to share about this experience, we'll keep it to this. But if I asked each one of you, maybe your memory of a time where you really felt so present and nature looked so vibrant and you felt so alive, many of you will share a childhood experience. And of course, this is not limited to childhood, but as a child, the ego isn't so strong yet. And so the mind is not as overactive often. So this comes as time passes, we build our identity. And the more attached we are to our identity, the more we suffer, because we cling to the things that we think that we are, and you know how it goes. So in childhood, we're innocent. We're kind of like a clear slate, with less self-awareness. If we were to say a baby is a Buddha, not quite, because while their mind might be clear, they're not self-aware. And in this process of self-realization, we are becoming self-aware. We're becoming fully present, fully aware of ourselves, our true self, the heart, the spiritual heart. And yeah, and I love to share also, because while I like to share about the challenging moments, I also love to share that I laughed a lot especially during the 20 days of solitude. Getting the shower to be hot was such a trick. And it's quite cold in the mountains. But one day I went into the forest because I didn't want to use a lot of wood. that the workers cut. So I went into the forest and I filled the bag with like pieces of wood, and I filled the thing and I lit it and I got under the shower, and it was not lukewarm or semi-cold. It was like hot. And I just burst out laughing, and I was just like giggling in the shower, and I was like, a hot shower. Like, this is Om Namah Shivaya. I was so happy, of course, silently, but I was just like, and even just having like the breakfast in the morning at 11 a.m., they bring you breakfast. It's the same every day. It's oats, fruit, and a soup. And it's all vegan, delicious, just sattvic, which means, not intense flavors, but in a sattvic diet, all the flavors are amazing because you're not distracted by the excess salt or the things we might be used to in our diets. Giggling at the taste of pineapple. This happened last year as well. Like, I was like, how is this little yellow thing so delicious? I don't understand. Just eating it and being like, wow. So I giggled a lot. I laughed at myself quite a lot. Yeah, just silly thoughts. Had many moments where I felt like, yeah, solitude is not lonely. Like, I'm with me, and God is with me. And if the word God doesn't resonate with you, the universe is with me, or the divine, this great mystery that animates all of life. So although there were difficult moments, I feel like I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to go again. And something my teacher said, so after the 20 days of solitude, I traveled to Masunte, so took the shuttle, which was a challenge not to speak. I had to write to the lady. I was like, I'm going to Masunte, and people tried speaking to me, and I had a little badge that said en silencio. So I was just like, so I traveled back to Masunte and then joined the last 10 days with my teacher, which I was so happy to be guided and to be meditating with 80 other yogis. I was so happy just to be with people. Like, I wanted to hug everyone, although we're not supposed to even make eye contact, but I was just always happy just to be there. And my teacher read a text about, during one of the sessions, about spiritual power. And he was saying that sometimes people have an idea that spiritual people are like passive, and that acceptance means passivity. But of course, we have the examples of people like Gandhi, who were indeed very accepting and very compassionate, but not passive at all. Peaceful, but not passive. Very much an activist, but a very different approach to thinking that violence will reduce violence. Of course, it never does. But he spoke of this need for these people who are willing to go through challenging experiences for the evolution of their soul. And I know most of you have done a yoga teacher training, and if I asked you, you might say, yeah, it was, actually all of you have here. You might say, yeah, it was amazing. But during it, there were moments where you missed your home, and maybe you missed your family, and maybe, you were sleeping in a bed that wasn't yours. You missed your kids or your cat, and it wasn't easy. So I see you, and I honor you all for being willing to walk this path, because we need people who are willing. Because the easier option is to say, stay comfortable. Like, instead of going into silence, I book myself a resort and eat chips and watch Netflix. That sounds great too. And instead of doing yoga teacher training, I can go on a holiday. And it's not to say that there is no space for that in life, of course. The school I go to is a tantric school, so the approach is very much that the divine is in everything. Chocolate is equally divine as rocket. Didn't mean to rhyme, but I did. So it's not that we can't enjoy life, because sometimes people tell me, oh, but I enjoy life. I don't want to stop enjoying life. But when we renounce for some time, renounce music, the first time I listened to music after the retreat, I cried. Hearing a song that I love, I was just like, oh my goodness, music. I love music so much. And picking up my guitar, I was like, oh yeah, I play the guitar, sweet. And I've written a song. And seeing my partner, of course, I was so happy, and bumping into friends and seeing the kids I volunteer with. The love that I feel now feels like I didn't think it could be even stronger. And you know, seeing your faces now, like I'm so happy to see you. And had I not gone away in silence, maybe I would be a little less. Right now, I'm like, oh, I just want to squeeze you all and hug you. And I really mean that. It's like this impulse of life. That taking a time to go within and to renounce, to say, okay, I'm going to give this up and give this up, to focus my attention inward. And while it is challenging, because it would be a lie if I said, no, it was a breeze, I had no difficult moments, and I see no point in that. So as I've expressed from the beginning, that at times it was very difficult, actually. And I wanted to quit, but last time I did as well. There were moments when I say I wanted to quit, I never considered it. Like there was this like impulse of just wanting out, of being like, oh, this discomfort. Like I don't want to experience this anymore right now in this moment. But then it passes, and then being like, yes, of course, I'm going to do my afternoon meditation, and everything will be okay. And so that's a snapshot, of course, in a 1 hour call. So, you know, only so much can be said. And I feel like a lot of it is an experience of the soul that words can't really express. What I wish to you all is to have the possibility in this lifetime to experience silence. There are many ways you can do this alone, you know, 24 hours where you say, I'm putting my phone aside and I'm just going to spend a day contemplating nature. And maybe the first time you do it, you decide to read. In the retreats I'm offering, I am allowing people to read, just because I'm aware that the idea of silence without any kind of distractions can be overwhelming. And my intention is to make these experiences accessible to everyone. So it's a journey and it's a process, but perhaps you start with 4 hours. In our daily life, for many of us, there aren't 4 hours while we're awake, when we're silent, without a phone, without distractions. Often there is something that wants our attention. But in that, choosing to be with yourself, there really is such a profound gift of intimacy. And as much as possible, if you want to practice silence, try to keep your awareness in your heart. The mind will often want to take over. Just continue to bring your awareness into your heart, not just in silence, just in life. If we all continue to bring the awareness in the heart, then eventually it becomes a practice, and then we live in the heart. We live from the heart. And we can hopefully all imagine what a world where everyone lives from the heart would look like and feel like. So thank you so much for listening. That was quite a monologue. If anyone would like to ask a question, anything at all, there are no taboos. You can write it in the chat or unmute yourself, and I'll answer as best as I can.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm wondering, when you first started going to these silent meditations, can you remember what were things you were feeling or experiencing in your life that led you to have that interest to do these silent retreats?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chiara. So The first time I heard someone speak of Vipassana and they said it was 10 days of silence, I said I could never do that. So that was my first response to that. And years passed. I watched a film called Samadhi. I believe it's available on YouTube. I went through a breakup that was quite difficult. And so I would say that suffering arose an interest in silence, which, you know, on the spiritual path is something that is quite commonly seen. Like the Buddha's story, he was a prince that lived in, not to compare myself to the Buddha in any way, just I mean the link, right, between, so he lived as a prince in a lavish environment, had women and food, and it was when he saw suffering, he saw someone sick, someone older, and someone dying, that he said, okay, suffering is inevitable for all humans. How do we get out of this loop of suffering? And so it was actually through my own suffering that I started being interested. And I did my first 3-day silent retreat. I think it was 7 years ago now. And fortunately, I wrote blog articles after every silent retreat, not after the 3 days, but then I did 10 days, then I did 17 days, then I did 6 days because I missed the 17 days due to flight cancellation. And then I did 49 days and this time 31 days. So for each one of those, I have a blog article that I haven't read actually, but would probably be interesting. What I do see very clearly is how much easier it has become physically, mentally. Like the first 10 days, the physical discomfort was very challenging. And last year and this year, I've had no physical discomfort. Like my back doesn't hurt, my knees don't hurt. The first year, my back, I had a really intense point, and I felt almost like someone was digging a knife into like a part of my back. And I realized, my teacher always says, relax. And I thought I was relaxed, but there was like a little bit of, and so now through practice, I realized like, oh, of course, now my body understands relaxation better. And even mentally, I remember the first 10 days, mostly, I felt like my mind was just like ping pong. Like it was just like thought. And I was like, what is this mental void that my teacher speaks of? Like it was completely foreign to me. And last year I experienced mental void properly for the first time. And this time I was able to walk without thoughts. I was able to eat without thoughts. Not for one day. I would love to be able to say that I had days without thoughts. You know, it wasn't a day, it was moments. And it was beautiful because I was like, without the mental commentary, every moment is perfect. So it's beautiful to be able to acknowledge that despite the challenges, there is a progress, there is an evolution. But yes, my inspiration to participate was actually my own suffering, but then the teachings always say that we can only contribute, really. Ramana says, I don't remember the exact quote, but something like, your own self-realization is the highest gift for humanity, something like that. And so all the teachers tell us, you want to save the world, you want to help, you know, that maybe sounds a little too much, but you want to help humanity, help yourself. And so this aspiration, this icha, like I really feel this calling to serve, to be of help. But I know that as long as I'm stuck in my stories and my own dramas in my mind, then I can only be of limited service. So this aspiration to truly awaken to who we are is what drives me more than anything. Thank you for the question, Chiara.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing everything. So beautiful.
Thank you, sister.
Really, I might have one question if you still have time. Thank you very much first of all for sharing. I hope I can formulate the question and that you can understand it. You are describing the end of your experience, and you are describing how excited you were when you were either seeing people, like now describing the small icons that you see here. In general, like yeah, how excited you were when you finished the experience to face the real world, right? So I'm wondering if there is like a constant behavior when someone is finishing this sort of experience to say, hey, of course, you're going to appreciate more life, which of course is going to be the case because you were lacking of contact and many, many things in one way. But on the other hand, there has to be like a lot of knowledge in the whole experience. So I don't want to put both of them in a scale, but how do you feel? Like, did you finish the experience with this feeling of, okay, I reached so much during these 31st days, or you were just like, I need to connect again. I need to be back in real life. I don't know if you get it.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Mhm.
So indeed, in silence and solitude, so much wisdom grows. So I would say more than knowledge, because the knowledge we can read about and is something we learn, and the wisdom is something that grows in us. And so this spiritual maturity, this ability to witness difficulty, to witness beauty with the same equanimity, is the wisdom that grows. Again, I insist that it's not a me thing. It's not personal. It's the practice that works on anyone who takes up the journey. You meet people who've been meditating for 30 years and they emanate. My teacher's been practicing yoga for 40 years. He's self-realized, although he won't say it. But he just emanates this profound peace and joy. And that's from all those hours of meditation, all that time spent in solitude. So as you say, this knowledge, I just making the slight difference, like the wisdom that grows in that time. But my teacher's approach is not that you have to be a monk, because this requires really another level of commitment and renounce life altogether, modern life, in order to attain liberation. But that this is accessible to laymen. My teacher has a wife, and he doesn't live in a monastery, although he guides silent retreats all the time. But so he is living, I wouldn't say a normal life, because what's today a normal life is not exactly the life he's living. But there is this feeling very much that what has been learned, what has been understood on a soul level is with me. So then I feel like a joy to share it with others. So not a feeling like, okay, that's there and this is life and it's separate. Of course, they're very different, but it's like all that is experienced in that serves me to live life. And so the separation is more mental, the like that and this, because ultimately it's all life. It's just a different experience of life. And all of it stays with me. I might not be meditating 8 hours today. I'm not. But that experience of depth, of feeling the infinite universe in my heart, which I felt so clearly, of like, yes, words don't fit the experience, but this immensity within means that I can experience life differently because of this awareness of that infinite space within. So there wasn't a feeling of, oh no, I don't want to leave. There was a like, yay, I'm going to see my partner again. And also, I know I will return. So it's like, I think this will be like an annual thing for now. I don't know how long. I need to see how, I don't know. It feels a bit soon coming out of this experience. But what I feel certainty about is that this path leads to less suffering for myself and others, and more joy and more peace and more love. So to me, that's a very clear, it's like, yes, it's hard. And if it serves others and myself, then it's so clear that it's right. So yes, there was an excitement to return to life and a feeling that I was taking the silence with me, that I didn't have to leave it. It's like what has been experienced is in me. Does that answer? Yeah. Ish.
No, it did. I mean, I know what you mean. I think that complements like some of the thoughts that I had in my head. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali. Anyone else would like to ask? Okay, well, in that case, I thank you all from the infinite depth of my heart for taking your time to unite here in this space, in this virtual space, and listen and ask questions and simply be here. I will be offering a 3 to 5 day silent retreat in Panama, and Jamie will be there for the 3 days. Of course, I am so grateful that I get to share this. I will be sharing one in the UK for 3 days outside of London in September. And I plan on continuing doing this. So if you can't join this year, but you're interested, stay in touch, and I'll be so happy to share information on what will come next. And if you feel inspired to meditate, but feel you need some guidance, you can also message me and I'll happily share some guided meditations that I have. And if you have any questions, I'm very grateful to be able to support anyone who's feeling called to take up the practice or deepen their practice. But the number one recommendation, whether it's in meditation or not, is just to continue to come to your heart, come back into the heart, and keep that connection alive as much as possible. Thank you all so much. Namaste. Many blessings.